Hey everybody, I'd like to have us work on an activity today about culture. This class is called American Cultures, and of course we're learning about history of our country, but also culture at different times as well. Later in our semester, we will read a book, a historical fiction novel, that will help us learn about culture of early America. We can learn about culture in a lot of ways, and reading historical fiction is one of them. You'll have the option of reading either My Brother Sam is Dead, Fever 1793, or Chains, all of them about young people experiencing difficult circumstances in the early part of American history. And we're reading these books to learn about culture. We've already talked about housing culture a little bit. Today we're going to work on clothing culture. Now, to make this work for us today, what I'd like us to do is just think about what's the culture of us today when it comes to clothing. We're not reading the book yet, so we'll get to that part later in the semester. But we're doing some preparation for that by thinking about clothing culture today. What is normal clothing for eighth graders? Maybe some of these things are normal for you. Maybe it's normal for you to have a phone instead of a face. I don't know. But whatever normal clothing may be for you, that might be more normal for some of us, t-shirts, shorts, jeans, whatever. Late 1700s, American clothing, probably normal clothing would have looked like that. Normal people doing normal things. Look at the hat the man is wearing. Ladies always in dresses. Men in these short pants, sometimes called breeches, where they button or snap below your knees, and a big tall socks. Always a jacket, always a hat out in public. We'll answer some questions in a document here in a little bit about how often do we change clothes. For you and I, that's probably pretty common. For people in the early part of American history, not common at all. You might wear one set of clothing for sports, one for dress up. These people probably wearing the same thing mostly from day to day to day. Their clothing didn't change a lot, and you didn't have a lot of types of clothing to change into. Another question we'll think about is materials our clothing is made out of. In family consumer class, you probably talk about different materials that clothing is made from. With today's modern technological fibers, go back to early American history, and you pretty much have two things: wool, which comes from sheep. This one looks like it needs a shearing, and cotton. Those are the two things that most of our clothes are made out of. Either those two things or some combination of the two. The way clothes are manufactured, very different today. Big machines, big factories. You can make all kinds of complex designs and colors and patterns. Late 1700s, it's a very slow process that involves maybe a whole family. And even some people's last names are based on the clothing industry. A last name like Weaver, for example. That's what this family is doing. They are doing the whole cotton process or wool process, from carding the wool to get all the fibers going one way, spinning it into thread, taking the thread and weaving it into a piece of material, and then taking the finished material out for sale. For us, we'll have you think about how much of your clothing is store-bought or how much is homemade. Well, for us, most of our clothing is probably store-bought. If you make clothing at home, it's probably something that you've learned to do, a skill you've learned to have that not a lot of people in America have these days. Probably not a lot of bearded men either. I want you to think a little bit about what kind of clothing is acceptable or not acceptable in different contexts for us. You might say, this clothing is never acceptable. That's a little goofy. Well, to each his own. But yeah, there are certain places where you may be able to wear certain stuff and get away with it. Other places not. At school, there's a dress code where, what you wear at the beach might not be acceptable in school. In this case, well, this is stage performance clothing. This is not what you're going to wear to the grocery store, probably. It might be great for on stage, maybe not great for everything else. We'd like to have you think about a question called, what is dressing up? What does it mean to you to dress up today in your life? Maybe it's suits or ties or whatever. Maybe it's a formal dress. And maybe something you would wear to the homecoming dance in high school is very different than what you would wear just a normal everyday clothes to school. Hairstyles, I guess, can be considered part of clothing. Today's hairstyles very interesting, very different. Late 1700s, especially for wealthier people, these might be some examples of the hairstyles they're wearing. And how do you like this? If you read Chains, one of our three choices of trade books, there's a part there where the family is very wealthy and they're dressing up for a fancy, fancy dinner. The wife makes fake eyebrows for herself out of mouse fur. Yes, mouse fur, where they find a dead mouse and they cut the fur into little strips that she glues onto her face to be her eyebrows. That's weird. In 2020, of course, different kinds of hats are stylish. Might have been a lot different in the late 1700s, where women are wearing different things for at home, different things for out in public. Men wearing essentially what these are called tricorn hats, where you fold the brim up into three sides. And then when you need to, you just let the brim down if it's raining or something like that. I want you also to think about this when you answer some questions here in a minute on a sheet. Are there certain age groups that own certain styles of clothing? Like, soccer players, maybe they're the ones who are allowed to wear tyro pants. Or gymnasts can do the leotards that say best friends when you put the two together. Or do old guys have certain clothing that they're supposed to wear? Old ladies, maybe they wear house dresses like this. Maybe young, healthy boys wear jerseys. Actually, I thought about this because I heard somebody once say that once a man turns 30 years old, he should no longer wear jerseys of his favorite team or favorite players. Because by the time you're 30, you're never going to be that professional athlete that you might have hoped you were going to be. Or what about Skechers with Velcro straps? My older son, who's very concerned about style, says I can only wear these shoes after I turn age 75 because nobody younger than age 75 wears these. So maybe certain age groups own certain styles of clothing that I shouldn't wear something that belongs to your generation, and you wouldn't want to wear things that belong to my generation. Last thing to think about is this might be a clothes closet in the late 1700s. Maybe you've got a couple of pegs on a wall at home that you hang your shirt on when you go to bed. You put the shirt back on the next morning because we don't really have a lot of changes of clothes. Compare that to this clothes closet, which is super nice. In fact, that looks like it's bigger than most of the bedrooms in my house. Pretty nice closet. Maybe in modern America, some of us might even have enough clothes to fill up a closet like that. Well, so we've got a lot of differences between our culture and the late 1700s culture. You're going to answer some questions about clothing culture on a sheet of paper that you're going to have here delivered to you through Canvas. And the idea is to take a little bit of time, think about what you wear, think about what's right for your age group or not right for your age group. Think about what it means to dress up to you. Probably means different things to different people. What does it mean to have clothing that could fill up a closet or not? What does it mean that certain age groups should own certain kinds of clothing? Well, the whole idea is we're just thinking about our own clothing. When we read our trade books later on in the semester, probably late November, early December, we'll be comparing the culture of early America to some of the work that we're doing today in class. So that's the idea about your trade book clothing. And so you are going to go ahead and go into Canvas. You're going to work on answering the questions that you'll see on the clothing document. And I can check and see what you do for clothing. Later on, we'll compare that to our early American experience.